we are in the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. If we can start with just an adoption of the agenda. Second. All those in favor, opposed, carried, and approval of our minutes from our September 20th meeting. All those in favor, opposed, carried. We have three public delegates this morning, and I'd like to invite them up. The first speaker is Roderick Lewis. Is Roderick here? Okay, we'll come back. If he's still around at the end, we will invite him back up. Our next speaker is Luka Maletic. Welcome. Oh, maybe turn the microphone on. There should be a button. Perfect.
Right. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning, Mayor's Council. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak before you this beautiful morning. My name is Luka Maletic, and I am, as well as my peers joining me here, economics students at the University of British Columbia. In one of our classes, our professor strongly encouraged us to go and advocate to better our communities, telling us to stop complaining and finally start doing. Even though at this moment he was the one complaining about us, it really struck a chord with us. And we decided we wanted to address something that affects a significant amount of UBC students, our daily commutes. Specifically, we focused on the 99B line, which is responsible for almost a third of all public transit commutes to and from campus. The 99 is infamous for many reasons. You cited as the busiest route in Canada and the United States. Also, according to your 2018 Transit Service Performance Review, it's the highest in average daily trips, as well as having the second worst rate of overcrowding. Given these statistics, one could imagine a packed 99 from beginning to end. However, this isn't the case. Students from UBC are all too familiar with the sight of a half-empty bus by the time they finally reach campus. This is a sharp contrast with how packed the buses are when commuters start their trips from Commercial Broadway Station. We see this as an allocative inefficiency, and we believe that our proposal can help increase how effectively we are using our current bus space. Furthermore, we believe that a large factor that attributes to this inefficiency is that the 99 has two distinct rider groups that compete for the same amount of available spots. The first being regular Broadway corridor commuters who commute in a more normal fashion, with the second being UBC commuters who essentially stay on the bus all the way up until it stops. Meaning that a very large portion of the space on the bus won't gradually open up. Thus, in order to address this issue, we're proposing creating what we call the Broadway Express, inspired by some of your other express lines, which would be a new bus route using a portion of B-line buses that are already available that would run parallel to the current 99 route. And it would only operate during peak transit hours when the 99 is most overcrowded. Although it would follow the same route, the Express would only make a stop at City Hall Station before making its way to UBC. In doing so, this line will will improve transit efficiency in two main ways. The first is that it would incentivize UBC commuters to opt for the Express as it offers a faster route. This then creates a second effect in that it will reduce the stress that UBC commuters create on the regular 99 line, allowing for a greater proportion of seats to open up intermittently as the route goes on and regular commuters enter and exit the bus. As such, introducing the Express allows each bus line to better address the needs of the individual rider groups. UBC commuters get there faster, and regular commuters don't have to deal with pesky college kids. This allows us to increase the benefit while maintaining the same amount of buses. Furthermore, we understand that Translink has long-term solutions planned to address this issue, and although they may excite my little sister, they won't be able to help current issues facing commuters. SkyTrains aren't built overnight, and though they will address the increasing demand along Broadway, things will get worse before they finally get better. The Broadway Express is a short-term solution to mitigate these effects and help improve the everyday commute for those who take the 99. Thank you for listening.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. The Mayor's Council is actually dealing with a report regarding on bus speed, reliability, and congestion, so very timely to receive that. And I see you have submitted something to us in writing as well, going in, I think, a little bit more detail. So I think we're certainly going to share and engage that with our staff at Translink regarding some of the ideas and concepts you've come up. I recently took the B line just last week, and I'm always amazed, at a bus that goes every 2 minutes, that it is absolutely packed leaving from Commercial Broadway Station. So certainly well aware of the huge congestion on that bus line, and certainly the impact it does have on students getting to UBC. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time, guys. Have a good day.
Mary Brody.
Yeah, to the delegation, through the chair, to the delegation. That's you. Thank you for your very compelling and interesting analysis of a difficult situation. My question is, have you corresponded with or been a delegation to the Translink board? Because the Mayor's Council has very little control, if any, over this matter. The matter really sits with the Translink board itself.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting idea to pursue, but I believe the next board meeting is mid-November, if I'm, December 6th, so even further away. But
I definitely think this report, not only will we be sharing it with Translink staff, I think it would be very relevant to also share it with the Translink board, and certainly you'd be welcome at the Translink board, no doubt, to be able to present them as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other suggestions? All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Greg Pipita.
Good morning, Mayor's Council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and give a little bit more about the railway technology. And I'm really impressed with how all of the mayors, new and existing, have ramped up so quickly to all of the issues that are going on. It's encouraging to see, and I'm impressed. What I'd like to talk a little bit more about is the impact that the finances are having on what we're doing and the capacity. And I found an interesting thing last night. I was looking at some Translink information about capacity, and I've discovered that cars 121 to 036 were actually, those are the original Mark 1s. They were originally intended to be delivered to Milan, but UTDC refused to install rotary induction motors in them. And then they were left over, and BC Transit actually purchased them at quite a discount. So that was an interesting fact to see. What I've also provided here is a more detailed part on the Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia basically can afford any train that it wants, but it is almost ready to run, and they're running with the same Innovia, which is the Mark IIs. And it seems to me that the cost differences would make it more compelling. And if you're doing rotary induction, it allows you to do the UBC subway with more expansion. The linear induction motors are limited, and it limits their capacity. So if you went with the standard rotary engines that virtually most of the trains on the planet use, you would be able to ramp up and expand, and there's absolutely no reason that they can completely run on the all-existing track of the Expo and Millennium lines, as well as the Surrey lines. The other part about capacity is, as I mentioned before, Calgary has about 245 vehicles, and they're able to transport over 60,000 people. And with the new, because I looked at the information, so now when you're looking at the Translink capacity, they've added some new Mark III cars, which are the full pass-through, the 400 series. So even with that, you're still just a little over 36,000. So, and the maintenance cost that's all involved in there seems to make the, and I'll finish up quickly. There's also the issue that when you're doing the linear induction, you've got double the motors. So you're actually putting more of the cabling. And one last point is that the Dunsmuir Tunnel was for a steam train, and that's how you were able to double track. So if you build a tunnel for the subway and you build it specifically for the SkyTrain, you're never going to be able to do something down the road. So it would probably be better to build a little extra in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which is our bus delay congestion report. And I understand we do have a staff presentation.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Ross. I'm the Director of System Planning, and with me today is Daniel Freeman, who's our Senior Manager of our Rapid Bus program. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about a really critical issue in the region. And so I'm going to hand it off to Dan to deliver the bulk of the presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. So as Mayor's Council, you've seen in your package, we have today released, or early this week released a report, first for us, about bus delay due to congestion in the region. I think as the committee, as council is well aware, we are in a period of unprecedented ridership growth in our region, which is really terrific news. Bus ridership is a really important contributing factor to that. And one of the things that we want to highlight for you is the risk that the region faces around that growth, and we want to understand some of the undercurrents that could jeopardize the really important trajectory of ridership that we want to continue on. So for context, bus ridership represents almost 2/3 of all transit boardings in the region on a daily basis. That's 267 million a year. And 80% of bus routes in the region are slower than they were 5 years ago. So that represents a significant risk to transit ridership and transit performance in our region. This is obviously something that is not good for our customers. Nobody likes a slower, less reliable journey. And also importantly for this body, it has a significant impact on regional transit finances. It costs us more money every year to provide the same level of service to our customers. To keep that same frequency, we need to add additional operating costs and additional fleet to keep providing the same 10-minute service. As you see in this example here, it costs, if the trip takes an extra 10 minutes, it costs us an extra bus to provide 10-minute service with all the associated capital and operating costs. That adds up quite significantly over when you look globally at our entire bus operations. It represents about 12% of our annual operating budget we estimate is due to bus delay. So that's a very significant cost, and that's a cost that has been growing. We've been adding time to our schedules to the tune of $2 to $5 million per year. So that is incremental to our annual operating budget, and that is equivalent to adding a new rapid bus line every year or two. And so obviously we would much rather be spending those resources, I'm sure as would you, addressing some of the really critical bus and transit needs across the region. And so there's a big cost burden there that we're placing on taxpayers. So what we've undertaken here in this analysis is the first region-wide analysis of passenger delay that's been done comprehensively using an incredible amount of data, considering both delay, so looking at all the GPS data on our buses, every route, every segment, every time period of the day and weekend, and also looking at the number of passengers affected by that delay so that we can identify the areas where the most delay is affecting the most customers. Through that, we have identified priority locations. There are the top 20 corridors for bus passenger delay that you see on the map here that are across the region, which is a reflection of the fact that we have both very high bus ridership all over the region, but also increasing congestion on our roadways across the region. Each of those 20 corridors, we've also undertaken a more detailed analysis to understand where the delay is occurring, where speeds are slow, where travel is very unreliable, and also an assessment of what some of the issues that are likely the causes of that delay. And again, it varies quite significantly from one, these are very different contexts across the region, as you well know in your communities. Beyond that, we've also identified additional hotspots throughout the region. There are some instances where there may be a big point of delay on a secondary corridor that might be really significant. There are opportunities at bridgeheads, at key interchanges and exchanges where there can be quite a lot of delay just in one small section. And so it's important also for us to understand where those are and to highlight the need for action kind of across the region. These are, I think, really importantly not intractable problems. There are a whole host of solutions to these problems. We've released a toolkit to accompany this report that highlights a whole series of possible solutions and some of the different contexts where they might be most applicable, as well as some examples both locally and across North America where they've been in place successfully. Really importantly for this body as well to understand is that the control over those solutions is not primarily within Translink's authority. Translink has control over and influence directly on a number of the operating measures, as as you're well aware. The key elements that affect the performance of a bus service are about the streets that you and your councils all have jurisdiction over, as well as the Ministry of Transportation on the highway system. So signals, intersections and bus stop infrastructure and transit lanes and regulations, those are all within local and BC Ministry of Transportation control. So we, through our work with you and your staff, have been making some important headway over the last couple of years. We have about 30 lane kilometers of new bus priority that are going to be delivered or in the process of being delivered by next year through the Rapid Bus program. So we're very excited about that. And we have funding programs that have a lot of flexibility, recognizing that we want to be able to fund capital projects as well as operating plans, changes to signals, pilot projects, the whole range of interventions that might yield solutions. And we have staff and expertise to support you. But to be more successful, to continue to really tackle this growing problem, additional partnership is needed with each of your municipalities and the ministry. So with that, bring us to the recommendation, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation. I'll open it up to the floor. Maybe I'll start. First of all, I think it is a bit of an eye-opening report. I think sometimes we mistakenly think our bus routes are just going to continue to do what they do every single year, and I think this certainly highlights that every year, unfortunately, the performance, because of our limited road network and increased congestion in the region, becomes less and less efficient there. One question I had was, I think sometimes when we see these types of initiatives that do require funding to make happen, and ultimately in many cases will actually pay for themselves, there can also be a bit of a conundrum on how to actually fund them, because it's a new additional funding source that has to pay for them, but ultimately it leads to saving. Is there any thought to potentially having a more sustainable funding model that can really just continually be directing the savings of this program into doing more of this type of work, instead of constantly having to have it be a new ask with a limited budget number attached to it?
So on the funding side, we have a few different things in place. So for all of the rapid bus corridors, Translink has funding to be funding 100% of any changes we're making to the streets to improve the transit priority through that on those corridors. And it doesn't just benefit the rapid buses. Those are corridors that are serving many different bus routes. So I think there's a great example we're making a change in Coquitlam that's going to save several minutes. So that will really benefit not just people taking the rapid bus all the way in from Port Coquitlam, Maple Ridge, and Pitt Meadows, but every other, what's the number of bus routes in the Northeast sector that go through that one intersection? So we are doing that. We also have a program for cost sharing with municipalities, similar to what we have on our cycling and our road and our walking to transit programs, to partner with municipalities to invest in changes that can support the improved transit priority. So we do have some things in place. I think our message is that we definitely need, and we're doing some, we need to do more. Some of these things actually aren't that expensive, because you can make a huge difference by making changes, by just putting down some paint, changing some parking signs. That doesn't cost a lot of money. It can be very difficult to do, but usually the constraint isn't the cost.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. That particular intersection that she's referring to, that the number that I was given at one point was that of all the people that make that left turn, the majority of them, the large majority of them, are on a bus. There's a lot of traffic, but the bus is an incredibly important movement at that intersection. intersection, and making a couple of minutes of change is incredibly important to the system. This morning I actually had to it was suggested by one of our residents, because of the another bottleneck that creates several bus routes that go across the Brunette overpass, and they get stuck in this enormous traffic. The resident actually suggested that I drive east to Port Coquitlam and get on the freeway, and then go along the freeway for the next stop, get off the freeway, and get on the Brunette overpass that way. And it was much faster to go well out of several kilometers out of my way to get on the freeway and get off the freeway, because the Brunette overpass had been taken over by Moti to be used as part of their offer. I'm left with, how do we get, and thank you to Mayor Cote, who got together with our community a couple of years ago, many years ago, and we came up with a solution for that would alleviate some of these bus challenges, and it sits at Ministry of Transportation's office unresolved. Those kinds of challenges, and I know every community has them, does Translink actually step in and offer our lobbying or support or something for the kinds of improvements that are needed at the local and the interaction between local and Moti on the road network?
Yes, we do. So on that particular example, Translink has also been on the table with cities of Coquitlam and New Westminster and the ministry to talk about that interchange, and we're there representing a variety of regional transportation needs, but most critically bus access through that. We've also been working closely with MOTI through our rapid bus program, because many of the rapid buses are running on roads that are ministry right-of-way, and so we've been having them very involved in working through with them and advocating on where we think transit priority is warranted.
So do we see Ministry of Transportation, are they eager partners or willing partners in these discussions? Because I think of other discussions we've had, on bus routes connecting Richmond to the 22nd Street station, getting priorities on the Queensboro Bridge there, and we haven't made a lot of progress. And
I think that what we've been doing through our work is really bringing a big spotlight on issues that haven't been typically front of mind for many people who are managing the road network. So we're working to build up understanding, particularly among ministry staff, on the critical nature of this issue. And I think we will continue to work on that, and there's more to be done there.
okay, thank you. Mayor Dingwall?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll just make a couple of comments. One, busing has really been at the core mode of public transit for most jurisdictions since the beginning. That is the main theme for public transit, and I do think that we need to pay particular attention to that. It's like policing, where uniform policing and general duty is the core mandate. Busing is very similar in public transit. Second one, I was so pleased, Mr. Chair, for you to mention around revenue and alternate sources of funds. That's a common theme here at Translink, but also at Metro, and we're struggling with that, trying to figure out how we can fund these really important projects as we move forward. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And finally, Ms. Ross, I know you touched on the collaboration, the partnerships, which is really important. The main one being the province, but secondly, local governments and how we work together to try and accomplish, particularly with bus movements, that how we can increase effectiveness throughout the metro area. So again, I think we need to tackle all of these as we move forward. And personally for me, if we're investing dollars, we need to make sure that our priority really needs to start from the main part, busing, and then look to see where we can afford all the rest of it. But again, I appreciate this report greatly.
Thank you. Director McClellan?
Thank you. So thank you for this. I I found it really interesting as well. And just one observation, perhaps more for all of us, is you spoke about the users that are being delayed and then the extra cost for us. Another factor in this that maybe we can all use in our advocacy is just the potential users that are not using the bus because it's inefficient. So, you know, if we're looking from a provincial level or a municipal level or personal level at, you know, trying to get more people using public transportation instead of driving, well, you're weighing up the costs, and I mentioned this in the other meeting, but that, you know, if I'm looking at my driving time and then I look at the transportation time, if it's similar or way longer on a bus, then I may not choose to do that. But if I can be stuck in traffic and see this bus zipping by me, I'm going to be incentivized to do that. And so, just an observation.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron?
I would echo that just as a follow-up. I think that saying it's X number of dollars that we're losing every year to this, that's not something that resonates, I don't think, with most of the public. But if you put it in terms of, well, if we had this, we could do this, or these are the practical effects to you, because our budget is so large that people don't really relate to small increments that are being lost, I think. So I have two questions. One is, I seem to be thin on the ground for the North Shore here today, so I'm going to channel my inner Mike Little and and ask about the Second Narrows Bridge and the Highway 1 upgrades there. I'm concerned that there isn't going to be adequate bus priority measures to get buses on and off the bridge in an efficient way and to get around what's still going to be, even after the project, of pinch point. To what extent is Translink in discussions with MOTI and the municipalities about, I think the municipalities are in the dark. To what extent is Translink in discussions with MOTI about making sure that, you know, FIBS links really well, Marine links really well, and that we don't have buses stuck, because we're going to be doing V-lines more and more across that bridge, and if they're stuck in traffic, it's going to be a crying shame.
Sure. So I think to be candid, we have had very limited involvement in discussions specifically about bus access to and from the bridge, and so I think that is an area that we would we raise this with ministry staff, and something that we do want to be pushing for additional improvements. So that is something that is important. I think our analysis also highlights that the bridge itself and access isn't the only issue. So the bus passengers heading over our important bridges are also being delayed on the approaches to the bridges, which are not solely in ministry jurisdiction. A number of those are on the North Shore or on the Burrard Peninsula in Vancouver and Burnaby, and so we see it important to be tackling these issues at all of those points. Passengers, you know, being delayed for 5 minutes on the bridge or in the approach or 5 blocks before the bridge is still 5 minutes or 10 minutes to our customers. And so we see all of those as areas that there are opportunities for action and things that can happen.
Well, for sure, but there's hundreds of millions of dollars being spent right now on the North Shore by the province to improve traffic flow there. And so now, if you don't get in now and make sure it's done properly, then you're locking in a suboptimal situation for the foreseeable future. So I'm really concerned about this, because I mean, I talked to Mayor Mike the other day, and he doesn't, I mean, his understanding of the bus access lanes is from a sketch on one of the reports that he happened to come across. So there doesn't seem to be good communication between Translink municipalities and the ministry about this, and it's not my place to facilitate that, but somebody should be taking ownership over that. I guess the second thing I wanted to mention is this report is great, and I see that with the graphics and the colors and the size of the bars, you've tried to make it more intelligible and easier to digest. I think that one of the other things would be useful is to have a granular level. So, for example, over the Lionsgate Bridge for North Shore residents, you know, how many minutes is it slowing down the bus at particular times of the day? And then the second thing is how is that changing over time? If we can tell residents, well, you used to wait at 6 o'clock, 5 minutes, and now, or this journey used to take 5 minutes, you know, 10 years ago, and then now it takes 10, and in 5 years it'll take 20. then that again is something that's relatable. So I'm wondering if it's possible to drill down and for municipalities to get this data, the data underlying this, and to look at the sort of a time on particular routes, a particular amount of time, and over a period of time.
Yeah, so maybe just to quickly go back to your first point and to the second, the Translink is not leading any of those individual projects, so we're trying to tie into them as much as we can. So both at the ministry level and the local level, we really look to the road authorities to involve us, and we're going to try to continue to be involved as much as we can to support and provide information. But ultimately, Translink doesn't control these initiatives, and decisions about the design of roadways are not with our agency. And so I think we really look for each of you and your communities to bring us into those discussions where we can, and we will continue to advocate, as our leadership is with the ministry, to be more involved in those projects. And at those projects, to your second point, we do have an extraordinary amount of data, more than we've ever had before, and we have been providing that to municipal staff in West Vancouver and through all of your jurisdictions. So the intention of this analysis is to say where are the biggest areas of need and for customer impact, and where can we have the most effect in reducing some of our costs, because that is something that's important, obviously, for us as an agency and this body to care about, but also where can we help the most people today. And to points made earlier, as we help those customers on those busy corridors, we would certainly expect that more people will go to those services because they'll be more attractive. We know that we can't, with a few exceptions, we can't expand the road network significantly in our region. The one that we have is what we have, so how can we make the best use of it to serve the most residents and the most customers? So we have extremely detailed information that can support staff in making those analyses and making those difficult trade-offs and decisions that are different in one context to the other.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
So one of the questions I had have largely been raised by Councillor Cameron, but we don't have traffic congestion problems on Bowen, but what happens in our neighboring municipalities clearly impacts what happens with the 257, which clearly impacts the travel times of our residents. So this detailed the detailed analysis of the top corridors, can we get copies of the ones for West Van and Vancouver so we can lobby them to help out with the 257? And I clearly, with Councillor Cameron's comment, for the second narrows, all the work that's being done now, I think you're going to have to be proactive with the province, remembering the frustrations from years ago of trying to be proactive with them when they were redoing the highway around the Horseshoe Bay Ferry Terminal. They didn't really think very far in advance when they were doing that.
So the two of the top 20 corridors are for passenger in the region affect the 257 route, for example. So the Marine Main corridor on the North Shore and the Lionsgate Bridge Georgia Street corridor. And so information about those is contained in the report. If there's additional, more detailed analysis that is needed to support any local decision making around those, we can work with staff to provide that on a case-by-case basis.
And we also have the what we call the sub-regional maps that show the hot spots. So in the presentation, we just chose to pick on Mayor Stewart in the Northeast sector, but they do exist for the every sub-region.
Well, thank you very much for the report. Certainly, I think this report raises the level of awareness in terms of this big challenge that I think is only going to continue to be a challenge in our region in delivering efficient bus service. I really kind of, if I compare it to something similar is something like energy efficiency projects where, you know what, if the business case makes sense, you get the payback under a reasonable amount of time, then these projects just have to make sure they have to happen. But I think the report also highlighted is Translink alone can't do this work. It needs to have partnerships with local municipalities. It needs to have partnerships with the Ministry of Transportation to really get these things on the ground. And yeah, these are going to ultimately have at times a bit of conflict or rub, because what we're talking about is dedicated dedicated road space and allocating that, and those aren't always easy conversations in our local communities. So I can see the recommendation is asking for, so that's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded, to essentially reach out to cities so that these conversations can happen at the local level with local councils. How does staff envision that being facilitated or happening?
So the purpose of this recommendation is that we recognize that these decisions need to get made largely get made at local councils, and so it's great to have the opportunity to through the Mayor's Council build each of your understanding, but we want to also have an opportunity to build understanding at all of your local councils, and so. You know, we have had opportunities to speak to many councils. I'm thinking, for example, City of Langley. We've been there a couple of times and been able to help them understand, and we're moving ahead on some great transit priority in and around Langley City. So we would work with your staff and manage our own resourcing, because we can't come and do it all right away, because I know you'll all be jumping up and down for this, but come out and work with your staff and talk to you and pull out some of those in-depth analysis of what's going on more locally or affecting the services that your residents use a lot of, regardless of whether it's in your community, so you understand some of that.
Okay, thank you. Director McClutchan?
Just hearing the discussion around the table, would it be worth putting something in, excuse me, about also our group and Translink also working a bit more with the province on this? Okay.
So, I think we can maybe look at the recommendation, but I think it's actually a given that we're going to be engaging with Ministry of Transportation, particularly on case-by-case things there. So I think that work will happen there, yeah. Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? It carries. Okay, so we have a relatively short meeting today. I guess I just want to conclude by acknowledging that we had a federal election recently, and I want to congratulate all the local candidates in Metro Vancouver. We've got a number of new members of Parliament, and I know us as a body are eager to engage and partner and work with not only our local MPs, but also the new federal government. This body certainly was very open in terms of our requests and desire to have a strong federal partner in the upcoming election, and I think a number of the platforms did reflect that, but I think we have some work to do to turn some of those election promises into real commitments and partnerships with us. So I'll leave it at that, and if I get a motion to adjourn our Mayor's Council meeting. All those in favor, opposed, carried, and we'll resume in 15 minutes in this room once things have been cleared.